Well, good morning, Restoration. I hope you are doing well, and it's so good to see you here online, whether you're watching on our Facebook or on our website. We are glad that you are here today as we hopefully bring this house church thing to a close over the next couple weeks. This week, we're going to continue the Take Heart series in the last part of the New Testament. Next week, we'll look at an Old Testament verse of the Take Heart thing. And then on June 7th, when we can get together face to face and see each other in person, not just online, that day we will begin a brand new series that I hope you'll be here for, because it's going to be really important as we go through the summer on this series together. But for today, I'm glad you're here online with us. And my friend Vinny, he saw this online. He decided we needed a logo in here. So he made this awesome restoration sign for our office today. And hopefully today is the last day that I'm teaching in the office. Next week I'll be teaching in the chapel. And then after that, I will hopefully see you in person on June 7th in the chapel. And so thanks, Vinny, for this. It looks really cool. Can't wait to see all of you, though, June 7th as we get together in the chapel. This week, big news. My family, we were very adventurous, and we decided we were going to go out, like in public, like where other people are. And so we went to the Clearwater Marine Aquarium. My daughter loves this place. It's like her favorite place in the world. And to go there, you have to make a reservation. And so we made a reservation online, and it was RSVP for an hour-and-a-half slot. Brings up a little side note here. On June 7th and through the month of June, we need you to RSVP for services. There's a 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and a 1 o'clock where you can go and you can RSVP right now. Even if you have to pause the teaching, come back to this in a second. Go to restoretrinity.com, click the link to RSVP, and go ahead and sign up for those services. So we know you're going to be there. We know how many people are going to be in the building. We also know how to accommodate you and your family, because there will be a spot for kids and families. There will also be a spot in the main chapel area. Either way, we want to be ready for you, and we need to know that so we can keep the head count to the right amount. So please let us know right now. But rabbit trail aside, shameless plug over, let's move on. We were at the aquarium and we had a beautiful day. I mean, besides the face masks we had to wear, it was awesome because there were so few people there and we could see the animals a little bit closer. It was a way cooler environment that way. And we really just had an awesome day. I mean, the kids, they were just so happy to be out. And my daughter was just in her element because there's animals. And my son was in his element because there's people. And we were just having such a glorious time being outside a little bit and getting some fresh air and just kind of re-entering this world. And so as we were leaving, I mean, we did all the things that we don't normally do. Hit the gift shop, had some fun, kind of just hung out in a way we don't normally do. And so we were done, we were leaving, and we went to go get in our car. And we got in the car and we all sat down. We were so happy and everybody's having a great time. And I put the key in the car and I heard that click. You know the click I'm talking about? Just the click, click. And that's all you get? Yeah, we got that one. Now the dome lights are on, the gauges are moving, and I'm thinking this is probably not a battery, but maybe, hopefully it's a battery. So I went to go ask the people who worked at the aquarium if they had jumper cables or like one of those little jumper systems that they could help me get my car started. And they looked at me like I was crazy, like they were very much like, we run an aquarium here, not a mechanic shop. But it turns out there was this auto shop next door, and they said if you go over there and you give them your driver's license, they will give you a set of jumper cables to borrow. I thought that's a great deal. I mean, just giving them my identity for me to take this jumper cable, what a good move. So I went over to give them my driver's license. I walked in, I offered them that, and they said, no, we don't do that anymore, but for $20, we'll just come over and jump your car. And I thought that's even better. And so the guy says, I'll meet you over there. And he gets in his big truck and he drives over. Guys, I'm not kidding when I say it's like a 20-yard distance between the shop and the aquarium parking garage, maybe 20 yards. I don't know why he drove there. I thought it was maybe so he could jump the car with his vehicle. He didn't need the vehicle. He had one of those little jumper kits. Not necessary, no idea why we did that. That has nothing to do with the story. But we got over to the parking garage. He pulled in next to our car. The people around us were so kind and let him in, and it was just awesome. And so he pops the hood. He starts to crank the battery, and he looks at me. He's like, it's not the battery. I was like, I was afraid it wasn't the battery. He goes, it's your starter. And I thought, I think that's more money. And he said, yes, it's more money. So he calls one of his guys that works with him, and he asks him to come over, and the guy comes by with a pry bar and a hammer, and he just starts pounding into our starter. I don't know how this works. I don't know what he was doing exactly, but if they turned the key at the right time and the guy hit the thing at the right time, magically the car did start. And so they were like, how much gas do you have? And I said, we've got like half a tank. And he was like, do not turn this car off until you get to a mechanic. You need to get to a mechanic you trust. You need to do it right away. So we were thinking, okay, where do we go? And so we got on the phone and we started calling people we know. And we started calling people who knew people, right? You know these people, they know people, they're helping you out, and they're trying to find somebody who they know. And so we called a guy that Joyce had recommended to Janessa, who was recommended to us, and we start calling this guy, and he's given us a quote. Start calling other people who Ken had given me this other guy's number, and I call him, and he starts giving me quotes, and we start calling other people, asking around, who knows who can help us out? Who should we take this to? And then people start saying, can we pick you up? Do you need help? Do you need a ride from somewhere? And so I called Ken and I said, yeah, can you give us a ride? We went to Joyce's guy who Janessa had gone to, and Ken shows up to pick us up there, and he puts us in his car and drives us back to our place so that we can pick up another car. And as I'm doing all this, as I'm thinking about this, first of all, it's what we get for trying to get out like the first time in 2020, right? This is what we get for trying to leave our house. But secondly, I think about all these people and the friends and the relationships you keep, and who is it that you keep around you? When you're in a spot like us, where it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year, who do you surround yourself with? Whose presence do you put yourself in? Do you think about this sometimes? Like, who are the people around you when you're in a tough spot? Who are the people you surround yourself with when things are difficult? When things are looking bad, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, even your year, who are your friends that you can trust? Who are the people you can count on when things are disappointing, when things are discouraging, when things feel like they've completely gone off the rails? Who can you trust? And maybe you don't have a long list, and I would challenge that in our day and age right now, most of us don't have a long list of people we can trust because we disregard relationships very quickly. What we're looking for in our world a lot of times is we're looking for power, or we're looking for money, or we're looking for sex, or whatever it is, and we're looking for these things, and we will discard relationships to get what we want. We do it all the time. We look for power, and if people get in our way of us accumulating the power we want, we will disregard them. We look for money, and if people start to get in the way of our search for the money we want, if they start to get in the way of the money that we think we deserve, we will disregard them. If it's sex, we will throw people by the wayside relationally to get the things physically we want. We do it all the time. And I would say that right now in our culture, this is part of why we have the loneliest culture that's ever walked the face of the earth. This isn't just me speaking. Scientifically, right now, studies are showing that even before COVID, we were the loneliest generation to ever walk the face of the earth, and it's only getting worse. Generation Z will be the loneliest generation on the planet soon. And you would think with all the social media and all the other ways to connect with people that would not be the case. And even again, before COVID, it was being proved that would be the loneliest generation because social media is not making us more social. And because our connection to other people is being negated and thrown away and falling apart so that we can get the things we want. If we can get the power, the money, the success, the sex, whatever it is that we want, we will throw the people away who get in the way of that. We're getting better at throwing those things away. And I fear what will happen to us after this pandemic, after we have learned to be socially isolated and fend for ourselves even more than usual. What will this look like for us? What will it be like when we have to re-engage with real people relationally once again? I'm not saying that isolation has not been necessary because we want to protect people who are vulnerable. But at the same time, if we're not doing it to protect people who are vulnerable, but we're doing it to protect ourselves, it's a different story. And I think people are going to come out of this and be in a lonely state anyways, in a world that is already at its loneliest. I was reading an article this last week by a Surgeon General who said that the biggest pandemic she had ever experienced was not something like COVID. It was not something like H1N1. It was not the bird flu. It was loneliness. That on a day in, day out basis, she was having to treat people for loneliness. Forbes magazine posted a massive study that said loneliness is as deadly as obesity. It's the same equivalent on the body as smoking 16 cigarettes a day, being lonely. We're created to have relationships, but so many of us will throw those relationships aside to get the things we want. And here's my fear, and here's where I'm going with this, is that my fear is we are not just throwing away our earthly relationships to try to get those things. We are throwing away our spiritual, our heavenly relationships in the same way. If God doesn't give me the money I want, if God doesn't give me the power I want, if God doesn't let me have the sex I want, then what do I want to do with that, God? It's no good for me. And we will throw that relationship away just as quickly. And in the difficult times, in the hardest moments, in the most disappointing and discouraging and moments of despair, who are you surrounding yourself with? Or have you disregarded the most important relationships? Have you pushed them to the side? See, it's not just about having great friends like I had with Ken who would come pick me up, or Joyce who would help me find somebody, or people who I trust around me. And I am blessed to have great earthly friends, but there's somebody who's even better than that. In Proverbs chapter 18, if you have a Bible, you can turn to it really quickly. I got a new one, guys, big news. But in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24, there's a verse written by the wisest man to have ever lived and walked on the face of the earth, Solomon. And he says this in 18, verse 24, he says, "One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin. But there is a friend who is closer than a brother." There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And he's not talking about an earthly relationship. He's talking about a heavenly relationship. And he's saying there is one who will be with you no matter what discouragement you go through, no matter what despair you feel, no matter what disappointment you face. No matter what disease you're in the middle of, no matter what divorce you've gone through, no matter what discouragement your heart faces today, there is one who sticks closer than a brother. And today, the story I want to look at is a story where Jesus is actually no longer here. The story that we're going to look at is in the book of Acts. It's after Jesus has ascended to heaven, and he's going to speak to Paul. And actually, these are the last words Jesus will ever say in the entire Bible, straight from his mouth. But he's going to speak to a guy named Paul. And it's going to happen not while he is here physically in an earthly form of relationship. This will happen when he is in heaven, and this is a spiritual relationship that he is going to speak. He is going to stay with. He is going to stick closer than a brother, and he's going to tell us to take heart. And right now, as you're in the middle of 2020 and you're in the middle of such a difficult season and such a moment of despair, no matter what you're going through, there is a God who is with you, and he is speaking to you saying, take heart. So if you have a Bible, I'd encourage you to walk through this story with me. It's a kind of weird one because it's in a massive context of a lot more going on, but it happens in Acts chapter 23. In Acts chapter 23, Paul is standing in front of a group called the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin is a group of religious officials. They actually were people who were fairly corrupt at this time, who were taking a lot of money in taxes from Jews to be able to support the temple. They were kind of like the elite of this pastoral group over the temple, but they were kind of corrupt. In fact, in the last few years, there have been houses uncovered. And in those houses, they have found bottles of wine worth more than $5,000 to up to $8,000 by today's standards sitting in those homes. I mean, like the wine alone was $5,000 to $8,000 in these houses. It's like the modern day version of Preacher sneakers. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's on Instagram. It's totally worth a look because it's fascinating. But that's what they were doing. They were having these very wealthy Sanhedrin people running the temple, and many of them were a little bit corrupt. And they did not like this Jesus movement. They did not like that there were guys like Paul out teaching about Jesus because they were Jews and they didn't want anyone coming along and messing up their thing, their temple, their way of doing life, their livelihood. They didn't want that. And so when Saul comes in and he becomes Paul and Paul starts to teach the good news about Jesus, they're not big fans of it. And they actually arrest him and they have a trial where they bring him in. Now, Paul, on the other hand, let's talk about him for just a quick second. He has been commissioned by Jesus to go and spread this good news of Jesus to all nations. And his real goal is to get it to Rome, throughout the province of Rome, throughout the countries of Rome. He wants them to know this good news of Jesus. He's on his way to go share that news. He feels that God has called him into that. But he's hit a massive roadblock because right now he's been arrested and he is in the custody of the Roman officials, including the Sanhedrin. And he feels like this is what I've been called to do. I know what I'm supposed to go do, but it's not happening right now. Again, how many of you is that 2020 for you? Where you knew something you were going to do, you had plans to go accomplish this thing, and now everything has been derailed. Everything is disappointing. Everything is discouraging. Everything feels like despair all around you. How many of us can relate to that? And so Paul's in this trial in chapter 23 before the Sanhedrin. And it says this in verse 1 of chapter 23 of Acts. Paul looks straight at the Sanhedrin. He looks straight at him. And he said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." Say, my conscience is clear by the way I've done this. Now, Paul knows that a clear conscience is not necessarily like salvation. It's not like you've done everything right. But it does mean that he feels that everything he's done has been the right way. And it says, at this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. And he's basically saying, you guys, punch him in the face. Let him have it. And so he's ordering them to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall." What he's saying is, you've painted over yourself. Just the outside looks good, but the inside is very dirty. The outside looks clean, but the inside is gross. He's saying you've whitewashed yourself to look like you're doing all the right things, but internally you're not. And then he goes on and he says, "You sit there and judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." And he's saying you have actually broken the law, which is true. There's a law in Deuteronomy 25 that actually speaks about this exact thing, that he has broken the law. And he's saying you're condemning me by the same law that you're breaking. Paul, by the way, would know these laws. Paul, at this time, he is genius. And he would have been taught by one of the best, if not the best, rabbi. Gamaliel was a rabbi in Jesus' day who was brilliant, highly respected guy. And Gamaliel, it's believed, was Paul's personal rabbi, his tutor. And Paul was highly educated, very smart man. He had grown up in this Jewish system that he is now fighting against. It's amazing how often, by the way, God does this. This is totally a side note, but God does this a lot. He pulls people out of difficult situations, whether it's Moses, who was living in the Egyptian household that he was in, and then he pulls Moses out of the Egyptian household and then sends him back to Egypt to go back to the people who were hurting him, and then says that now you're going to go set your people free. That place of pain, that place you came from, you're not going to go back to that. You're going to start over there. We see it with Elijah. Elijah defeats these prophets, and then he runs away, and God speaks to him in a still, small voice. But then he sends Elijah back to where he came. You're going to go back to that place, and you're going to try to change things within what's happening there. For some of us right now, this is, again, a total tangent, but maybe you're hearing this today, and you've come from a place of pain. Maybe it's in your family. Maybe it's something in your upbringing. Maybe it's a lifestyle you used to live. Maybe it's something that you've been through in your own life, and you are walking away from that pain. It is highly likely that God is restoring you right now in the moment you're in so that he can send you back into it to go and pull others out of it as well. And so Paul has been pulled out of this lifestyle where he has been a Pharisee himself. He has been a religious official. He was one who was killing Christians before Jesus changed his life. And now God's sending him right back in to the place that he was in. He's sending him right back to where he was and saying, now you got to change it. Now you got to do something about this. Now you got to bring other people out of the same denial you were in. You got to bring people out of the same system that brought you up. And so it says that he sends them back in. And it says, those who were standing near Paul said, how dare you insult God's high priest? Saying, Paul, you just insulted the guy, Ananias. He's the high priest. You insulted him. How dare you do that? And Paul replies, brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest. For it is written, do not speak evil about the ruler of your people. Now, some people believe that Paul says he doesn't realize it's the high priest because his eyesight was going bad. We know that in the book of Ephesians, he talks about his eyesight going bad. And maybe that's why he didn't recognize the high priest. Maybe he couldn't see him or whatever. Most people, though, a lot of scholars believe this is Paul being sarcastic. Saying, oh, I didn't recognize that it was the high priest. Saying that because he's acting this way, it's impossible to recognize him. Saying that no high priest should actually act like this. So of course I didn't recognize you because your actions are speaking louder than your words. Do you feel the tenseness of this conversation, by the way? Do you feel the intensity going on? Paul is standing in front of people who used to be colleagues, and he is calling them out. And they are calling him out. They're having him punched in the face. There is an intense dialogue going back and forth. This is heated. This is difficult. This is not an easy scenario for him to be in. This is where somebody is bound to be disappointed. Somebody is bound to be discouraged. Somebody is bound to leave this place feeling as though they are not on the right track and everything has been derailed. And the question is, will it be the guys who run the system? Will it be Ananias and the court of law that has been and will be for a long time? Or will it be Paul, who feels like the outsider coming back in? Who feels like the runt, the small dog in this fight? Will it be him? Which one will feel as though they lose courage? Which one will it be that feels like they lose cheer? Which one will it be that feels like they lose heart? One of them is going to have to feel that. One of them will feel as though they've lost. Will feel as though they've lost the battle. Will feel as though they've lost courage, that they've lost heart, that they've lost cheer. Which one's it going to be? And it says that right after that, Paul replies, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and others of them Pharisees, he calls out the entire Sanhedrin. He says, my brothers, I am a Pharisee. I'm descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead. And when he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. And the reason being that the Sadducees didn't believe there was a resurrection of the dead of any sort. They didn't believe there was any afterlife. The Pharisees did believe there was an afterlife. They believed there was a resurrection of the dead. They just didn't believe Jesus was the one who did it. And they start to have this argument. In verse 9 it says, there was an uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. We find nothing wrong with this man, they said. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him? The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. Do you see what's happening? The high priest believes that Paul is literally in mortal danger, that he could be torn apart by this crowd. That he has incited so much violence and anger. There's so much going on right now. Nobody's happy. Everybody's angry. And I'm sure Paul feels at this moment so much discouragement from the call that had been put on his life, from the plans he had made for where he was going. From the dreams that he had in front of him, he's feeling like all of it's gone away. And it says that following night, the Lord stood with Paul. Can you imagine that night, by the way? Can you imagine what's going through his mind that night? It might be very similar to what goes through your mind every night. Maybe you're a person who just can't sleep. Maybe it's gotten worse through this pandemic. Maybe there's just so much weighing on your mind. Maybe it's discouragement. Maybe it's disappointment. Maybe it's just flat out despair. Maybe it's worry, or it's panic, or it's anxiety. Maybe you're just feeling like you cannot get a grip on the moment you're in. And a lot of us feel this way right now. You're not alone if that's the way you feel. But the good news is, if you're in a relationship with Jesus, you're not alone, period. Because it says that the Lord stood with him. The Lord stood by him. I mean, how many of us need to know that? That in our lowest moments, in our most discouraging moments, in our most disappointing moments, that the Lord is standing by us. That he is with us. That he hasn't forsaken us. He hasn't forgotten about us. The Lord is standing by us. In those nights where it's the darkest moment, in the nights where it's the most disappointing, in the moments that it feels like despair, in the moments where disease or divorce or just disappointments take over our minds, that the Lord is standing by us. And in that moment, it says that the Lord says, take courage. Take courage. Now, Jesus, who's speaking these words, is not just saying them to him because everything's going to be perfect. In fact, what Paul doesn't know at this moment is that 40 assassins are taking an oath that they will go on a hunger strike until they have Paul's head on a platter. I'm not exaggerating that either. That's happening right now. Assassins are planning his death, but there is one who stands closer than a brother. And he says to him that he can take heart. Not because there's an absence of problems, but because there's a presence of one who stands closer than a brother. One who, like the pretenders, will stand by you. There's one who will stand with you. And he's saying, take heart, which is such a different idea, isn't it? It's like so outlandish. I have a friend whose name's Dave, and Dave is one of those guys who's so close with me. He's a good friend. And I remember there was a time in my career and things we were doing in the church, and we were talking about some things where I was trying to make a decision. And it was for the good of our church at Restoration. We had this idea that maybe I shouldn't work full-time inside the church anymore. Whether it was for the budget of the church, that we could do more ministry if I wasn't getting paid so much, and maybe we could have more hands make a lighter load instead of me trying to shoulder the entire thing, because that's not how community is built. And we were really wrestling with this decision. I had never not been in full-time ministry my entire career. That's all I'd ever done. And I had this opportunity pop up where I could go and do some other talents that I have of storytelling and consulting, and other things were happening, and they were opening up doors, and we thought, what if this was the best thing for Restoration Church? And I was really struggling with this idea. And I would call pastors and I would call people to get advice, and many of them would just give me this really quick blanket thing about how that's a dumb idea. And it was like, Kevin, that's dumb, or why would you even think about that, or what's going on? What's wrong with the church? What's wrong with you? That was a lot of the questions I got. What's wrong with the church? Is it not able to support you? Is it not good enough? Are things not going well for you guys? And I was thinking, no, things are going amazingly well for us right now. I just don't want to be the one who stands in the way of it going even better. And people would ask, are you not doing well? Are you close to burnout? Is this your problem? And I'd be like, no, I feel great. I love what's going on. I love all these things. I love that God's opening these doors. I love the community that's being built. I feel like it's going really, really well. And finally, I called my friend Dave. And when I called Dave, I laid out the whole scenario. Dave, here's what's going on. You know me. You know I've been in ministry my whole career. You know this is what I know how to do. And this is the only thing that I really feel called into. But at the same time, there's some other opportunities opening up. And I feel like maybe I should be pursuing these. Not so that I abandon the church, but so that I can increase the church. And I think it'll be better for the church in the long run. I think financially it'll be better. We can do more ministry stuff. I think in the long run, it'll increase more leadership within our church because I can't do it all. I'm so excited about it, but I'm also terrified. What do you think we should do, Dave? And he said something that nobody else said. And he goes, whew, praise the Lord. What do you mean? Did you hear the whole thing I just said? Did you hear all the words I spoke? Did you hear everything coming out of my mouth? Like, what do you think I should do? He goes, Kevin, first of all, you got to stop and just be grateful. Be grateful that God has put you in this place. Be grateful that God has given you a community that you love and that things are going well for. Be grateful that He's given you gifts that are outside of that, but still can increase what's going on inside of it. Be grateful that He's given you a leg into the community and a leg into the church. Be grateful that He's given you the foresight to know that maybe you are the barrier of growth that this church needs to get past. Be grateful for that. Whew. Do you have people like that? That just speak a different angle to you? Who are so close with you that they know you and they know the circumstance, but still they can see it from a different vantage point? That's what having a relationship, not just with Dave, is like. Not just an earthly relationship, but a relationship with Jesus is like. Where you can see beyond the circumstance you're in. You don't just get this temporary point of view, you get an eternal point of view. You get a grander and a greater and a bigger picture and vision than you ever thought of on your own. And that's why Jesus is in this jail cell with Paul, saying, take heart. Because your vision, your dream, your idea that you had about going and preaching this word to Rome, it's going to happen. The spread of this gospel that you think is now coming to an end because you're in a prison cell, it's not over. In fact, 2,000 years later, people are still going to be telling this story, not because you did something right, but because I showed up here and I spoke to you and told you that you should take heart, that you should have courage, that you should be of good cheer. The story is not over yet. It hasn't ended. And for some of us who have disregarded this relationship with Jesus, some of us who have discarded this relationship with Jesus, what would we have turned to that night? What would we have turned to? What do we turn to when power is gone? When the money runs out? When the sex isn't what we thought it would be? What do we turn to? What would we have turned to that night? What would you have turned to that night when all of your dreams are dashed, all of the things you put your hope in are gone? You are in despair. You are in discouragement. You are in a place of disappointment. Who do you turn to? What do you turn to? You need to turn to one who sticks closer than a brother. One who doesn't leave you nor forsakes you. And that's hard to find in an earthly realm, but it's not impossible to find in the heavenly realm. Because that's what Jesus does. That's what He promises. And you have to determine today, who will you have stand by you? See, Paul's story isn't over. And he actually writes about this in the book of 2 Timothy. So in Timothy, he's writing to his successor. He's writing to the next guy who's going to take over Paul's ministry, because Paul has actually accomplished the things he set out to accomplish. He's actually done the dream that God put in his heart originally. And he's writing to Timothy to tell him about this. And actually, if you read it, and we won't go through the whole thing, he actually writes about a lot of people who let him down. He writes about one metal worker who really was not nice to him. He writes about some other people who lived in this area who were not good people and did not help him and actually swindled him and took advantage of him. But he says this at the end of it. So 2 Timothy 4:16, at my defense, no one came to my support. Everyone deserted me. All the things that I put hope in, all the people that I thought I could trust, all of the friends who I thought were there, I needed one who stuck closer than a brother. The things that I put my hope in, the power, the wealth, the sex, the success, whatever it was, they weren't there for me anymore. But may it not be held against them, because the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fulfilled and proclaimed, that all Gentiles might hear it, and I was delivered from the lion's mouth. He was delivered from those things, not because the right people were near him, not because he had great power, not because he had great wealth, not because he was having relationships with the right people, but because the Lord was with him. The Lord stood by him. You have to be very careful about who you choose to have stand by you. A couple weeks ago, my family was very excited because the new Disney Pixar film Onward came on Disney Plus, and it was a big night for us as we all gathered around to watch it. I know I've been talking a lot about movies lately. Apparently that's something that I'm doing. I don't know if we should just change these videos to just be about my critiques of films, and you can just tune in to watch me Siskel and Ebert them or whatever. But it was a good one. Onward was a good one. It was really, really fun to watch. And it was the story of a younger brother who doesn't know his dad, and this older brother who kind of takes care of the younger brother and really takes the dad's place. And there were a lot of tears, not by me because I'm heartless and broken or whatever, but my wife cried a lot of tears because it really is the story of me and my older brother. I mean, almost to a T, besides the wizarding part. We didn't have as much of that in our growing up. But like the other part was very, very much me and my older brother. And it was beautiful to see it on screen. And if you do watch it, I mean, like, I hope it makes you emotional, but for me, it was like they were telling my story. And it was so powerful. Because my brother and I have always been very close. I mean, when I was like 3 years old, my family was moving into a new house, and my dad had built the house. And in the blueprints, they had designed it so that my brother would have a room and I would have a separate room, because my brother's 9 years older than me. And he was like 10, 11 years old when we were moving into this house. And he said even then, I don't want a separate room for my brother. I want to share a room with my brother. And I mean, he was 16 years old while I was like 8, 7 years old. And we would like hang out together. We shared a room. He actually wanted to be around me sometimes. Who does that? And when our dad did die, we moved near each other so that I could be around my brother, because I loved having him around. I needed him around as an influence in my life. And when I got married, it was such an easy choice when you have to make that decision of who's going to stand by you. And I called my brother and I asked him, I need a best man, and you're it. It wasn't even a question, it was just a statement. I needed him to stand by me. And when the ceremony was over, I'll never forget it. He just gave me a big hug. And he just said to me, I'm so proud of you. I'll never forget those words. I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget what it felt like to have him stand by me. But the promise that I want you to know about is even greater than that. Because there have been things that my brother and I have gone through where we haven't gotten to be together. There have been moments in our lives that have been really difficult that we didn't get to experience side by side. But the promise that we have is that there's one that stands even closer than a brother. And he whispers in our ears to take heart, to take courage. He says, be of good cheer. Because no matter what moment you're in, no matter how discouraging or how disappointing or how much despair you feel, he stands right beside you, even right now. And even if you have discarded him or you have just disregarded him, he stands by you even now, closer than a brother, speaking to you, saying, take heart, take courage, be of good cheer. Today, you might have discarded this Jesus. Today, you might be feeling all alone. You might feel as though there's no one there with you. You might be feeling like your pursuit of power or of wealth or of success or sexuality, whatever it is, has taken you to a place where maybe you found that it can also leave you. Maybe you've been around people who have disappointed you. Maybe you're just in a place of discouragement or despair or disappointment today. May you know that there is one who's standing next to you. He's closer than a brother. He is not even social distancing from you right now. He is with you, speaking in your ear, saying, take heart, take courage, be of good cheer, for he is with you. If you don't know him, if you don't have that kind of relationship with him, would you today just pray to him, just speak to him. Let him know that you are listening, that you are willing to hear from him today, that you are grateful for his presence. And would you pray with me right now, wherever you're at, as we wrap this time up? Jesus, we are grateful for your presence. We are grateful that you are faithful even when we are not. And we thank you for being close to us right now. I pray that no matter what I'm going through, that I would remember you're with me. I pray that no matter what each one of us is going through right now, that we would remember that you are with us. Would we take heart? Would we take courage? Would we be of good cheer? Because you are here. We thank you for what you've done for us in our earthly relationships and in your time here on earth. But we also thank you for what you've done for our heavenly relationship with you and with our God. And the things that you're working on even when we can't see it. The ways you're moving in even when we can't feel it. The things that you're doing that you never stop working on every single day, all around us, inside of us, outside of us. We love you so much. We thank you for loving us, even at times where we're not very lovable. We pray that we would sense your presence and respond to it today. In your name we pray. Amen. I hope that you have a great day today. Hop on Zoom with us right now and RSVP for June 7th. The service is then, and I will see you in person on Sunday, June 7th, 9, 11, or 1 o'clock. Have a great day. Thanks for being here.